The valley woke under a skin of frost, and the graveyard sat quiet like it was holding its breath. Fog slid between the headstones in slow gray ribbons. A young woman knelt beside a fresh mound of earth under a lone cottonwood tree, her bonnet loose down her back, her gloved hands pressed into damp soil. Tears fell straight down, darkening the dirt without a sound. She leaned forward as if the earth could listen better that way, and her whisper shook in the cold. "I'm sorry?" I couldn't say it in time. Boots crunched behind her. A tall man stood 10 paces away, his coat moving in the wind, his hat shadowing a hard face. His storm-gray eyes fixed on the stranger, kneeling at his mother's grave. He did not speak at first. He watched her shoulders shake with another quiet sob. His jaw tightened, not from anger alone, but from the shock of seeing someone grieve here like they belonged. Then he stepped closer, careful, as if any loud sound might break what little peace was left in the morning. 2 weeks earlier, a stagecoach rattled into Red Basin just after noon on a Tuesday in late September 1883. Dust rolled off the wheels and hung over Main Street like a curtain. The driver yanked the reins, and the horses blew out tired breaths, foam at their bits. The coach door groaned open, and Alexandra Bowman stepped down with a small trunk clutched in both hands. Her dress was faded blue calico that once belonged to her mother. Her boots were worn thin. Her auburn hair was pinned tight under a plain bonnet, and the gloves on her hands were cracked at the fingertips from years of work. She stood still for a moment, scanning the street, searching for a face she only knew from a faded photograph that had arrived in Philadelphia 6 months earlier. She had pictured this moment 100 times on the road west. She had imagined a kind smile, a tip of a hat, a hand offered to steady her as she stepped down. She had imagined a home after years of loneliness, after sickness took both her parents and left her with a cramped boarding room and a heavy silence that never lifted. The driver climbed down and wiped his brow. He looked at her, then quickly looked away, like he could not bear to be the one holding the knife. He cleared his throat and spoke soft, rough words. "Ma'am, I got news you ain't gonna want." Alexandra's smile tried to hold on. "Is Mr. Gilmore delayed? I can wait." "I don't mind waiting at all. I've come all this way already." The driver's shoulders sagged. He took off his hat and pressed it to his chest. "He passed 3 days ago. Fever took him quick. Didn't suffer much from what I heard." The words hit her like a stone. Her hands loosened, and the trunk thudded onto the dirt, kicking up dust that settled on her skirts. She stared at him as if staring could turn the sentence back into something else. "He's dead," she said, thin and disbelieving. "Yes, ma'am. I'm real sorry." People moved around her like water around a rock. A man leading a mule glanced once, then kept going. A woman crossed the street without stopping. Red Basin was the kind of town where everyone carried their own troubles, and strangers were not a burden most folks chose to pick up. Alexandra sat on her trunk like it was the only thing holding her to the ground. She had spent her last money on the ticket. She had sold her mother's silver locket to afford the trip. There was no room waiting for her back east. There was no family, no plan. Just the dust, the sun, and the sudden truth that she was alone in a place that did not know her name. A shadow fell across her. An older woman stood over her, wrapped in a plain wool shawl the color of dried sage. Her face was lined from years of sun and wind, but her eyes were sharp and steady. She studied Alexandra's wet cheeks and slumped shoulders, the way her fingers twisted her skirt until her knuckles went white. The woman knelt, knees creaking, and lifted Alexandra's chin with warm, calloused fingers that smelled faintly of lavender and wood smoke. "No woman should be alone in a place like this," she said. Alexandra swallowed hard. "I don't have anywhere to go. I can't pay for lodging. I can't even afford a meal." "You do now," the woman said. "Come with me." Her name was Lydia Reeves. She walked like someone who had buried grief and still kept moving. She took the trunk like it weighed nothing and led Alexandra away from Main Street, past the saloon's noise and the blacksmith's sparks, past a small white church, down a narrow lane toward the edge of town. The cabin Lydia opened was small and weathered, its roof slanting a little, daylight peeking through gaps in the shingles. But it had a bed, a table, and walls that could keep the wind off. To Alexandra, it felt like safety. "It ain't much," Lydia said, setting the trunk down, but it'll keep the rain off your head, mostly. Alexandra's throat tightened. I can't pay you. I didn't ask you to, Lydia said. Sometimes folks need help. Sometimes we're the ones who can give it. The next morning, Lydia marched Alexandra straight to the general store. Mr. Zuniga, the owner, had thick gray whiskers and a tired frown. He tried to refuse at first, but Lydia's voice did not shake, and her words landed like truth. By afternoon, Alexandra was sweeping floors and stocking shelves. $2 a week. It was not much, but it was something. That night, Lydia brought her bread wrapped in cloth, 2 cold apples, a jar of blackberry preserves, and a quilt that smelled like cedar in sunlight. Alexandra held the quilt like it was made of gold. Shame and gratitude tangled so tight in her chest it hurt. I don't deserve this, she whispered. Lydia touched her cheek. Kindness ain't about deserving. It's about being human. And you're not nothing, child. You're still standing. For 2 days, Alexandra worked until her arms ached. She learned the faces of ranchers and mothers and children with peppermint on their breath. She slept under Lydia's quilt and felt a small seed of hope push up in the dark. Then the town bell tolled twice, slow and heavy, and the whole street changed. Men removed their hats. Women pressed handkerchiefs to their eyes. Low voices carried the news through Red Basin like a wind that found every crack. Lydia Reeves was dead, the cattle baron's mother, gone in her sleep at 72. Alexandra's broom slipped from her hands and clattered to the floor. That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, grief sitting on her chest like a weight. Lydia had saved her life with simple kindness, and Alexandra had never even said a proper goodbye. Before dawn, she dressed in the dark, wrapped her shawl tight, and walked through the sleeping town with wildflowers in her hands. The graveyard gate squeaked as she opened it. The hill was cold, the grass silvered with frost. She found the fresh mound beneath the cottonwood and sank to her knees. She placed the flowers carefully, pressed her gloved hands into the earth, and let the tears come. I didn't even get to thank you, she whispered. You stopped when everyone else walked past. I'm sorry I couldn't give anything back. I'm sorry I couldn't say it. Behind her, boots crunched frost again, closer now. Alexandra turned, and the man in the dark coat was standing there, watching her like he was trying to understand how a stranger could break open his grief in one morning. His voice was low and rough when he finally spoke. You're not intruding, he said, but I'd like to know why you're crying over my mother. Alexandra's throat went tight. She wanted to step back, to disappear between the headstones, but her feet would not move. The man's eyes held her in place. They were storm gray, sharp and tired at the same time, the eyes of someone who carried responsibility like a saddle that never came off. I'm sorry, she said, and the words came out rushed. I didn't mean to intrude. I was only trying to say goodbye. I should have asked. I should not have come. You're not intruding, he repeated, more steady this time. But I need to know. Why my mother? Alexandra looked down at her hands, still stained with dark soil. She tried to swallow, but her mouth was dry. She saved me, she said. His expression did not change much, but something in his shoulders eased, just a little. Saved you from what? The question opened the floodgates. She told him about the stagecoach from Philadelphia. The letters she had read until the paper went soft at the folds. The promise of a new start. She told him how the driver had delivered the news like a death sentence, and how she had stood on Main Street with nothing but a trunk and an empty future. She told him how people had passed her, how they looked away, how she had felt the ground tilt under her like she might fall straight through the street. Then she spoke of Lydia. The steady eyes, the warm hand under her chin, the cabin at the edge of town with a roof that leaked but walls that stood, the job at Zuniga's store, the quilt, the bread, the jar of preserves that tasted like someone cared if she lived. She didn't know me, Alexandra finished, voice breaking. She didn't owe me anything. But she stopped anyway. I never got to tell her how much that meant, I never got to thank her before she was gone." The man listened without interrupting. His face was carved into something firm, but his gaze softened a fraction, like ice beginning to crack. When Alexandra fell quiet, the graveyard seemed louder. Wind in the cottonwood leaves, distant birds, her own breathing. Finally he spoke. "My mother did that," he said, as if he already knew and still could not believe it. "She never could walk past a person hurting." Alexandra wiped her face with the back of her glove. "She was the kindest person I've ever met." He nodded once, slow. "What's your name?" "Alexandra Bowman." "Dorson Reeves," he said. The name hit her with its weight. Everyone in Red Basin knew it. Reeves' cattle covered half the valley. Reeves' land stretched farther than most people could ride in a day. Reeves' money kept the general store stocked through winter. And Reeves' pride kept people at a distance, because a man didn't become a cattle baron in frontier country by being soft. "I know who you are," Alexandra admitted. Dorson's mouth twitched like a smile tried to show itself and failed. "And I know who you are now, too," he said. "You're the woman my mother helped." His gaze dropped to the wildflowers and then back to her face. "You shouldn't be out here alone." "I'm fine," Alexandra said quickly, pride rising even through grief. "I can handle myself." Dorson's eyes narrowed slightly, not cruel but measuring. "Are you living in that old cabin by the lane? The one with the sagging porch?" Alexandra hesitated. "Yes." "That roof leaks," he said. She lifted her chin. "I manage." "My mother wouldn't have wanted you living there through winter," he said. "Storms get brutal in this valley." Suspicion flickered in her chest. "I don't need charity, Mr. Reeves." "It's not charity," he replied. "It's work. I need someone at the main house. My mother ran it. The cooking, the cleaning, the ordering, the accounts. Now it's a mess, and I'm drowning in things I'm not built for. I'll pay you $4 a week. You'll have a proper roof and 3 meals a day." Alexandra stared at him, searching his face for a trap. Men did not offer help without a price. She had learned that the hard way back east. But his eyes held something that looked like tired honesty. "Why offer that to me?" she asked softly. "You don't even know me." "Because my mother thought you were worth saving," Dorson said. "And I trust her judgment more than most, including my own." The words hit her harder than she expected. Her eyes stung again. She glanced back at Lydia's grave and imagined that steady voice telling her to keep standing. "All right," Alexandra said. "I'll take the work." Dorson nodded, as if he had been holding his breath. "I'll send a wagon for your things. Be ready by 8. He touched the brim of his hat, then turned and walked away, boots crunching frost. Alexandra watched him go, her mind full of questions she could not yet answer. By mid-morning, a wagon rolled up to the cabin. Alexandra packed what little she owned. 2 dresses, a shawl, a hairbrush, a small Bible, and a handful of letters tied with ribbon. She folded Lydia's quilt carefully too, because she could not leave it behind. It felt like the first kindness that had kept her alive. The Reeves ranch spread across the valley like it had a heartbeat of its own. Cattle grazed far out in the grasslands. Barns stood red and sturdy. Corrals held horses of every color. Men moved with purpose, calling to each other as they repaired fences and hauled hay. It was bigger than anything Alexandra had ever imagined. The ranch house was timber and stone, 2 stories tall, with a porch that wrapped around the front. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the windows caught the morning light, turning it gold. Dorson met her at the steps. "Your room is upstairs," he said simply. "If you need anything, ask Mrs. Patterson. She runs this place better than I ever could." Mrs. Patterson was stern and watchful, with arms strong from lifting pots and scrubbing floors for 20 years. She looked Alexandra over like she was judging the quality of a horse. "So you're the girl Lydia helped," she said, not unkind but firm. Alexandra nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Patterson's face softened just a touch. "Then you'll do your work honest." Lydia didn't waste kindness. Quote, Alexandra threw herself into her duties like she was trying to earn her right to breathe. She swept until the floors shined. She scrubbed pots until her hands burned. She warmed the kitchen before dawn and brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead. She folded linens with careful precision, making sure every corner lined up. Dorson watched more than he meant to. He noticed the small hum she made when she worked, soft melodies he didn't know. He noticed how she lingered near the windows to watch the horses in the corral, a quiet smile touching her lips like she forgot to hide it. One morning in the tack room, Alexandra reached for a saddle strap at the same time he did. Their fingers brushed. Heat shot up her arm. She jerked back, cheeks flushing. "Sorry," she blurted. Dorson cleared his throat and looked away. "My fault," he said. "Should have said something." After that, the air between them felt different. Not dangerous, but charged, like lightning far off on the horizon. On her third day, Alexandra asked to ride into town for supplies. Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose like she didn't trust it, but Dorson only pointed toward the corral. "Take Clover," he said. "Gentlest mare I've got, calm as a lake." Alexandra walked up to the dappled gray with confidence she did not fully feel. She refused to be seen as helpless. She gathered the reins, gripped the saddle horn, and hauled herself up with effort. She settled into the saddle and frowned. Everything felt wrong. The stirrups were not where they should be. The balance was off. The horse's mane was nowhere near her hands. She looked down, confused. Dorson froze by the fence, a tool still in his hand. His eyes widened as he took in the sight. Alexandra had mounted the horse backward. She was facing Clover's tail. For a long second, there was only the sound of wind and distant cattle. Alexandra shifted uncomfortably. "Why is this so?" she began, then trailed off, because Dorson's silence suddenly felt heavy. He walked closer, slow, like he was handling something fragile. His voice came out careful, low and dry. "Unless you plan on riding into the future, ma'am, you might want to turn yourself around." The truth slammed into her. Her face turned scarlet from her neck to her hairline. She scrambled down with no grace at all, boot-catching in the stirrup, nearly falling in her rush to escape her own shame. Behind her, Dorson bit the inside of his cheek hard enough to hurt. His shoulders shook as he fought the laugh that threatened to break free. "Need help mounting?" he called after her. "No," she snapped, marching toward the house like her life depended on it. "I'm fine. Perfectly fine." The laugh burst out of him then, rusty and surprised, like it hadn't been used in years. It was warm and real, and it startled him as much as it did the ranch hands who heard it. That evening, Alexandra lay in her bed upstairs, staring at the ceiling, mortified. But somewhere deep beneath the embarrassment, a small warmth spread in her chest. The cattle baron had laughed because of her. And for the first time since she stepped off that stagecoach, she wondered if maybe this place could become more than just a job. She did not know yet that laughter was only the beginning, and that the next storm coming for her would not be made of rain. Alexandra tried to stay serious after the horse mistake, but the shame followed her like a shadow. She kept her head down for the rest of the day, sweeping and folding and scrubbing, as if hard work could erase a memory. Still, every time she passed a window and saw Clover in the corral, she felt her face heat again. Dorson did not bring it up, but she caught him once at the hallway corner with a hand over his mouth, fighting a grin. That made her want to be angry, but it also made something soft grow in her chest. He had laughed. He had not laughed in a long time, the ranch hand said. Somehow, that mattered more than she wanted to admit. Later that week, Mrs. Patterson sent Alexandra into town to pick up a bundle of fabric and thread. Mr. Zuniga greeted her like she belonged behind the counter now. Alexandra was choosing a bolt of calico when sudden chaos exploded from the back room. A hen burst out like it was escaping prison, wings beating hard, loud enough to make customers jump. People scattered. One woman climbed onto a chair with a scream. Mr. Zuniga shouted for someone to catch the bird before it ruined his store. Alexandra grabbed the nearest broom and chased it without thinking. The hen zigzagged between barrels of flour and stacks of tins like it knew the store better than she did. Alexandra lunged. The hen launched straight at her face and tangled its claws in her bonnet ribbon. Alexandra shrieked and swatted at her own head while waving the broom like a weapon. In the struggle, she stumbled backward into a tall display of molasses tins. The entire stack collapsed with a loud crash. Thick syrup poured across the floor like a sticky flood, coating Alexandra's dress, her arms, and her hair. Feathers stuck to the molasses like glue. The hen tore free, flapped out the open door, and vanished into the street like it had won. Alexandra sat in the middle of the mess, dripping molasses and feathers, stunned and humiliated. Ranch hands outside saw the whole thing and laughed so hard they doubled over. Mr. Zuniga rubbed his temples and muttered that someone would pay for this. Alexandra wanted to sink through the floor and disappear. When Dorson heard about it that evening from a ranch hand who could barely speak through laughter, he found Alexandra in the yard scrubbing her boots with grim focus. He leaned on the fence, arms crossed, eyes bright with amusement. "Did the hen survive the encounter?" he asked. She threw a wet rag at him without looking up. He caught it with ease, and his mouth twitched. "I'll take that as a yes," he said. "You have a feather stuck in your hair." Alexandra yanked the feather out and glared. So helpful. Dorson's grin finally broke through, warm and real. For a moment, the stern cattle baron looked younger, and Alexandra's heart did something strange. She hated being embarrassed. She hated being laughed at. But she did not hate the way his smile made the air feel lighter. 2 days later, Mrs. Patterson took the day off to visit family in town. Alexandra decided she would cook dinner to prove she could handle more than sweeping floors. She had watched stew being made dozens of times. It looked simple. Brown the beef, add vegetables, pour in broth, let it simmer. She chopped carrots and potatoes and browned beef in a heavy pot. She added water and seasonings the way she remembered. Then she set it on the stove and went upstairs to change guest linens, humming to herself. She forgot the stew. Smoke rose thick and black. The smell of burning meat filled the house. Alexandra ran downstairs and froze in the doorway. Flames licked inside the pot, fed by grease that had bubbled over onto the hot stove. She grabbed a towel and waved it in panic, which only fanned the fire higher. Dorson smelled smoke from outside, and his fear hit hard. Fire was every rancher's nightmare. He ran straight to the house and burst into the kitchen coughing. He grabbed the pot with a thick cloth, hauled it outside, dumped the burning mess into the dirt, and stomped the flames out until they died. He turned back to find Alexandra standing in the smoky kitchen, face flushed, hair loose, eyes shining with shame and fear. "If you wanted to smoke me out, sweetheart," Dorson said through a rough cough, "there were simpler ways." Alexandra grabbed a potato and threw it at him with surprising strength. He caught it one-handed. Then he smiled fully, a real smile that reached his eyes. It startled her so much she forgot to breathe for a second. "I'll stick to sweeping," she muttered. "Probably wise," he said, still smiling, "but I appreciate the effort." After that, their days filled with small moments that neither named, hands brushing in doorways, a glance held too long. A laugh that slipped out when it was not supposed to. Alexandra felt the ranch becoming home in a way she did not expect. Not just the roof and the meals, but the feeling that someone noticed her, saw her, and did not want her to vanish. Yet she still kept the little cabin on the edge of the property as her private space, sleeping there some nights because it felt like something she owned. She told herself it was independence. But it was also fear. If she fully moved into the main house, it would feel like she was claiming a life she did not deserve. One quiet afternoon in late October, Alexandra was in town buying supplies when Dorson finally forced himself into his mother's room. He had avoided it since her death. The lavender scent still hung in her dresser drawers. Her rocking chair sat by the window as if she might return to it any moment. The sight tightened his throat. He began sorting her things with slow care. When he pulled back the bedding to wash the linens, something thudded on the wooden floor. A leather-bound journal had been hidden under the mattress. Dorson sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. At first, the pages were simple, full of ranch life and weather and small joys. Then he found an entry dated 3 days before his mother died, and his breath caught. She had written about meeting a young woman at the general store, alone and stranded, with her intended husband dead before she arrived. She wrote that the girl looked lost, but had steel inside her. She wrote that she helped her find the old cabin and work at Zuniga's store. She wrote that she felt something deep in her bones, that this girl belonged with their home and their family. She wrote that Dorson had been alone too long and needed someone strong enough to match him and gentle enough to reach him. Then came the line that stopped him cold. His mother wrote that her heart was failing, that she had not told anyone, that she did not have much time left, and that maybe she could set something good in motion before she was gone. Dorson closed the journal with trembling hands. Grief and love and guilt hit him all at once. His mother had known she was dying, and her final gift had been a stranger she believed could save him from the loneliness he wore like armor. That night, a thunderstorm tore across the valley with fierce violence. Lightning turned the sky white. Wind battered the trees. Rain hammered roofs like fists. Alexandra lay in the little cabin and listened to the storm with growing fear. Water began to drip through the ceiling. One drop became many. Then a section of roof cracked with a loud snap and gave way. Cold rain poured in, soaking her bed, her floor, and her trunk. The walls groaned in the wind. She tried to grab her boots in the dark. She slipped on the wet floor and slammed into the wall. Panic rose fast. The storm swallowed her voice when she tried to shout. Dorson lay awake in the main house, uneasy. He thought of her alone in that weak cabin, and his chest tightened. He threw on his coat and boots and ran into the storm without thinking. By the time he reached the cabin, water was pouring from beneath the door. His heart seemed to stop. He kicked the door open and found Alexandra standing in the flooded room, soaked and shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Her eyes were wide with terror. When she saw him, relief hit so hard her knees almost gave out. "Come on," he shouted over the roar. He lifted her into his arms, strong and steady, and carried her through the storm. Alexandra clung to him like he was the only solid thing left in the world. Rain soaked them both, but he did not slow. He did not let her go. Inside the main house, he carried her straight to the fireplace, wrapped her in a blanket, and knelt in front of her with water dripping from his hair. "You're safe now," he said. "You're all right." Alexandra stared at the fire, shaking, and something inside her broke open. "I don't belong here," she whispered. Dorson frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I don't belong anywhere," she said, and the words poured out like a dam giving way. She spoke of the dead groom, the empty street, the shame of needing help, the fear of being unwanted. She spoke of how she burned stew, rode backward, caused disasters, and still did not understand why people kept offering her kindness. "I'm just a nobody from Philadelphia," she said through tears. "I don't deserve your mother's kindness. I don't deserve a place in your house. I don't deserve you." Quote. Dorson's face hardened, not with anger at her, but at the cruel lie she believed. He cupped her wet face with both hands, thumbs wiping her tears with gentle firmness. "Listen to me," he said, low and fierce. "If you were worthless, I would not have run through that storm to get to you. You matter. You are here because my mother chose you, and because I choose you." Alexandra's breath hitched. His forehead touched hers. The space between them filled with heat and fear and longing. For a moment it felt like everything in the world narrowed down to the warmth of his hands and the fire behind her. Then he pulled back, jaw tight. "Not like this," he said. "Not when you're scared. Not when you might regret it tomorrow. We'll talk in the morning." He left before his restraint snapped. Alexandra sat by the fire the rest of the night, wrapped in the blanket, heart pounding, lips tingling with what almost happened and what those words meant. At dawn, Dorson came downstairs and found her still there. The fire had burned low. Her eyes were red, but clear. "I read my mother's journal," he said quietly. Alexandra's attention locked onto him. "She wrote about you," he continued. "She wrote that you belonged here. She prayed I would see it. I was angry at first. Then I realized she was giving me a gift, a chance." He turned fully toward her, storm-gray eyes honest and bare. "Stay," he said, "not as hired help, not as charity. Stay as my wife. Marry me." Alexandra's hand flew to her mouth. "Dorson?" she whispered, overwhelmed. "We barely know each other." "I know enough," he said. "You make me laugh when I thought I forgot how. You make my house feel like a home. My mother saw it before I did, and now I can't unsee it." Alexandra shook her head through tears, half laughing at the truth of it. "I can't even cook stew." "Then I'll hire the best cook in the territory," he said, and a small smile flickered. "Or we'll eat burned stew for the rest of our lives, and I won't care. I'd rather have your disasters than anyone else's perfection." Her chest filled with warmth, so strong it hurt. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man carrying loneliness like a burden he never set down. She saw the grief of a son who loved his mother deeply. She saw a steadiness that could hold her up when she felt like falling. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Relief broke across Dorson's face like sunrise. He pulled her into his arms and held her tight. Alexandra cried again. But these tears were different. They tasted like hope. They married 2 weeks later under the cottonwood tree near Lydia's grave, because it felt right to have her kindness at the center of it. Alexandra wore a simple white dress that once belonged to Lydia, carefully altered to fit her. She carried wildflowers like the ones she brought the first morning. Dorson stood tall in his best suit, eyes fixed on her, as if he could not believe the world gave him something this good. When the preacher said they could kiss, Dorson lifted her veil with careful hands and kissed her softly, then deeper, pouring his promise into it. Alexandra clung to him like she had finally found solid ground. After that day, she stopped being Alexandra Bowman, who arrived with a trunk and heartbreak. She became Alexandra Reeves, the heart of the Reeves home. She learned the ranch accounts and surprised everyone with how sharp her mind was. She remembered every worker's name. She kept the kitchen running smooth beside Mrs. Patterson. She helped families in town the way Lydia once helped her. Years passed, and the ranch prospered. Children filled the house with noise and laughter. The valley began to speak of the Reeves family as more than wealth and cattle. People spoke of the kindness that lived there and the strange love story that started in a graveyard. On a crisp October morning, 10 years after Alexandra first knelt in the frost, she walked back to Lydia's grave with wildflowers in her hands. This time her steps were steady. She knelt before the granite headstone Dorson placed there, carved with Lydia's name and a simple truth. Alexandra touched the stone and whispered, "I couldn't save you. You were already dying when we met. But I think about you every day. I tried to live the life you wanted for me. I tried to help others the way you helped me. I loved your son well." Footsteps came behind her. Dorson knelt beside her and placed a warm hand at her back. "She'd be proud of you," he said. "She'd be proud of us," Alexandra replied, leaning against him. They sat in silence, watching the valley breathe. The ranch hummed with life. The windmill turned. Cattle moved like dark dots in the distance. Somewhere near the house, children laughed loud enough to carry on the wind. Alexandra looked at Lydia's headstone and felt gratitude fill her like light. Her life had shattered on a dusty street. Then one woman stopped when everyone else walked by, and that simple act of kindness built a whole new future. As Alexandra stood and took Dorson's hand to walk back toward home, she glanced once over her shoulder at the cottonwood tree swaying gently above the grave. She did not know then that kindness had set more in motion than love and family. It had also drawn the attention of people who hated the Reeves name and who were waiting for the right moment to strike. And the valley, quiet and beautiful in the morning light, was about to learn that not every storm comes with thunder.